Welcome to the Liquidity Event, a show about all things personal finance with a laser focus on taxes, financial independence, and equity compensation. Hosted by AJ and Shane of Brooklyn FI, each episode will focus on a personal finance topic, some driven by news headlines and sometimes driven by listener questions. And sometimes you'll just get two money nerds rambling about what they think is interesting. Just a quick note before we get started, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax or investment advice.
Hello, and welcome to the Liquidity Event. We're your hosts, AJ.
And Shane.
And this is episode 112, being recorded on July 23rd, airing on July 26th. A quick reminder for everyone, you can always leave us a voicemail, ask us your financial questions, tell us your financial problems, and we will answer them live on the air. You get free financial advice from two idiots who have some experience in the financial services industry. You can do that at memo.fm/the liquidity event. How you doing, Shane?
I'm good. I'm answering friends' questions on 30-minute time slots personally instead of on the air, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. Whenever my friends ask me anything now, I'm like, I'll answer your question for free, but you have to record a voicemail at memo.fm/liquidity event. So please tell your friend to rewind. Or is it sometimes it's too personal. Sometimes it's too personal.
This one would have been fine. This one, it required a little bit of back and forth, though.
Not too late. Big news. Biden dropped out of the presidential race, has endorsed Kamala Harris for the Democratic presidential candidate. But this is a personal finance show. So let's talk about Kamala's finances. Ed, one of our planners here, just dropped this article like 5 minutes ago. So we've had like 5 minutes to skim it, but we thought it was so interesting that we're going to talk about it. So Wall Street Journal article, how Kamala Harris manages her money. Index funds and a 2.5% mortgage. Shane, what did you think of President-elect Harris's finances?
First of all, I'm happy that she released them, unlike somebody in the race. Apparently, they're not under audit.
Also, shout out to Veronica Dagger, who is a friend and writer at the Wall Street Journal. Hey, Veronica, great piece. Anyway, what were your initial takes on this?
Well, reviewing the vice president and the second gentleman's 2023 tax returns live on the
good old Doug,
the very first second gentleman of all time. Second gentleman.
Hopefully soon to be first gentleman.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, by the way, he's the taxpayer on the tax return, not the spouse.
I'm going to blame the accountant for that. I'm going to blame the...
I love how you... I can send you feminist layups and you can dunk on those.
Thank you.
I mean, what's interesting is that Kamala Harris, I wouldn't expect her to have very extravagant finances. She's worked in public service for almost her entire career. Really hard to make a lot of money in public service unless you've got some inside information and you can buy, select individual stocks a la...
certain other members of the Democratic leadership team.
It rhymes with Belosi. Who's the actor that Vincent Belagosi? It rhymes with Bela Lugosi from like the 60s. Anyway, she's got a ton of ETFs, a bunch of mutual funds, nothing too spicy in here. There's a couple like JP Morgan,
before
unfortunate.
You keep going, Shane, I had some feedback from a listener that said they have no idea what the hell we're talking about ever.
Oh, really? In terms of when we go off script or financial?
We love your banter, but when you start talking about finances, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
I was like, fair. And they're like, what's a liquidity event, by the way? And I was like, right. So I'm not saying we need to stop and define everything, but maybe we should be a little bit more descriptive when we're talking about like ETFs and like, what do we like mean by that?
For sure. Okay, no more jargon or anagram or acronyms.
We could use jargon, but let's call each other out to be like, wait, what does that mean? Like old school money splain style. You know what I mean?
For sure, 1,000%. So, what did I use any acronyms while I was describing?
ETF. You were just like describing her portfolio, like maybe like speak in plainer terms. Like why? Like one of the writers here called her portfolio boring. Why do you think they use that word?
Yeah, well, she has a ton of index funds, which is just a type of mutual fund or an ETF wherein it broadly diversifies across hundreds or thousands of different equities, which are stocks and bonds. You know, you can have everything in here from MGM to Nintendo to Tesla to Apple, right? And so she doesn't have any individual stocks or any concentrated positions, which is usually something you would do if you're betting on one company, right? Like if you think that Nvidia would be really interesting if she had like Nvidia in her portfolio, right? Because maybe
like an over concentration in it, someone was like, "Oh yeah, AI is coming. By the way, you're going to want to invest in these chips, like." Buy this company. And you know what? She probably got that tip, but she's smart and she knew that she would have a long political career. So she probably went, thanks for the tip. I'm going to rely on my broker or my diversified portfolio. I'm just going to invest in the future of the US economy and I'm just going to buy the whole damn thing. And I think that the US economy is going to go up. I think the global economy is going to go up. So I'm just going to keep investing in stocks, but I'm not going to weight it in one specific stock because I think it's going to do well or I have inside information.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, looking at her tax returns, it reminds me a lot of Hillary Clinton's returns when I used to look at those. There's not anything spicy in here at all. It's super boring. There's no dividends or interest, which is interesting. It means all of her taxable investments, the items that aren't in retirement accounts. First of all, most of her investments are in retirement accounts. I mean, her and the second gentleman are close to 60, right? Yeah. So it looks like they've been following really sound financial advice, and anything that they've invested in has been in tax advantage. So they probably put, hopefully $20,000 a year, each of them into retirement accounts each year for the past 40 years. They're about 60 years old. So they're looking down the barrel of retirement here.
She's even got a pension. She's eligible next year when she turns 60 from the state of California because she's been, a public servant, both in the courts and, in leadership. So that's cool.
She's kind of been a cop for 40 years, to be honest. As a prosecutor, a lot of people consider her fall under the umbrella of ACAB. There was a funny tweet I saw over the weekend that was whispering ACAB under my breath as I fill in the circle next to Kamala's name. I'm with the cops on this one. I put up a post on Instagram and then I immediately deleted it because I don't want to have a political Instagram. But it's kind of we get it.
Yeah, for there. You've uncovered some interesting things in her disclosures. What did you find?
I mean, when politicians actually fill out their paperwork correctly. And they do disclose all of the things that they have. They're worth between 3 and 5 million. It's tough to tell exactly how much money they're worth. They have some real estate. They have a lot of investments, which you would hopefully have. This is what you would want to see from a public servant that has diligently saved. But they also have to disclose all of their gifts that they receive, which makes sense. And everyone in the Trump cabinet all got in trouble for not disclosing these things. But even Kamala
because they obviously took them. Like if you're hiding it, it's because you broke the law, right?
God, they were getting in trouble like 2, 3, 4 years into their cabinet, even though there was a rotating door of an emptying swamp. But yeah, she disclosed that she did receive a gift of $1,655 from a performing artist, and travel reimbursements. First of all, she went to Howard University, so she received tickets to the FAMU, which I don't know who FAMU is, versus Howard, worth $1,900. Those must have been really good seats in Atlanta.
Oh yeah, maybe it was like the championship or something.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, I don't think Howard's going to any championship games, but maybe like D2 or 3. And then she also received $1,600 worth, a little inside football there. And then tickets to
just so
a concert.
Knows, she went to Ole Miss, which is like good at football or whatever.
Thank you, SEC Bimbo, for popping in.
Like football or whatever.
The source for the football game was ESPN. The source for the concert was Miss Knowles Carter, first name Beyonce.
Okay, so Kamala got comped $1,600 tickets plus travel expenses to go see Beyonce.
Exactly. Very cool. Very cool. So she's part of the Beehive, which hopefully the Beehive will be.
Yeah,
I'm sure Beyonce's
can we get the Beehive going? Let's
I'm sure
go.
The Beehive is all over this. She's just a nominee, or she's one of potential nominees. I think this is the first time in a few generations. I just read this book about James Garfield, who coincidentally, he died
assassinated, too. Like super early. He was the one who was like the shortest presidency, or is that somebody else?
Well, the guy, I think it was Zachary Taylor, gave the longest inauguration speech, died of pneumonia because he did the inauguration in the rain.
Because he was out for.
But Garfield was incredible. Spoke like 5 languages, taught classic literature. And then, he got shot by a psycho dude within like 4 months of becoming president. Didn't actually get to do anything. But that was like reading about the primaries back then was wild because he didn't even want to be president. They were like, hey, no, you are going to be the president.
The nominee.
Yes. Because you don't want it, we're making you the nominee. So, and this is the first time that the primaries won't decide who the Democratic nominee will be since like, I don't know, like the 50s or the 60s. Huh. So like Kamala will be,
luckily there's a Veep episode for exactly this case. If you guys want to know how that plays out, just throw on your HBO.
Honestly, I do. I love that show.
It's great. She I forget what happens. We were talking about it last night. Yeah. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I forget the name of her character in the show, but she's like, he dropped out. Are you ready? And I was just like imagining like Kamala and her kept being like, Anyway, the takeaway of this is like great Brooklyn FI clients, right? Like I love to see like our clients maybe like a little like more stacked in terms of like net worth because our clients are making more because they work in tech. And they do have concentrated positions in companies that hopefully, they got to buy in really, really early because they're employees and hopefully they are doing better than the stock market because they've invested specifically their time and years of their lives in these companies, but diversified portfolio, some real estate holdings, but not over indexed in real estate, a lot of assets in their 401ks, meaning they're shielded from paying income taxes each year. Is she a California resident? They live in Brentwood, but I would imagine she has to spend a lot of time in DC. So I'm wondering how their, state cross-border allocation works because California, high tax rate, I imagine they get some kind of break as she has to spend a lot of the year in Washington. But that's maybe for another follow-up episode once we can dig more into her disclosures.
Oh, well, maybe we can get Shasi Merpuri from Baker Tilly, their CPA, according to their disclosures.
A lot of inbounds coming in for Shasi.
I love when they disclose tax returns.
The accountant.
By the way, she paid an estimated tax penalty of $450. She's just like us.
She's just like us. Just like us. She got too busy. She was too busy running the country, you guys. We're too busy running the business to make our stupid June 15th tax payments. Come on.
I wonder if Shashi got an earful for the estimated tax.
The estimated tax. Underpayment. Oh, it was from her book earnings, right? Because all the other income would have had withholding, but it had to be kind of like those one-off royalties from the success of her books.
$26,000 of home mortgage interest expenses, notably $23,000 of charitable contributions in 2023.
That's great. That is great.
Much more than I. But yeah,
and much more than
she only made $7,200 off her book in 2023.
That's royalties, though. It came out a while ago.
Okay, right.
So she probably
the truths we hope.
Also, the fact that she's getting royalties is great because with a book deal, you get this massive advance, and publishers often just think you're not going to earn out your advance. So the fact that she's getting royalties means she probably earned out her advance, which is good, which is very good. So that means she sold a lot of copies. So
do you want to explain royalty accounting, et cetera, to the listeners?
Not really, but effectively, people always claim like, I'm not getting any money from my publisher. It's like, well, your publisher gave you a large advance on the future earning potential of that book. So they took a chance on you. So if you haven't earned that back for the publisher, let's say it was $100,000. Let's say your book's earned $88,000 for the publisher. According to your royalty split, you don't get 100% of every sale. You would have not earned out your advance yet. So it sounds like she has earned out her advance. So congratulations.
California residents paying taxes in DC as well. I'm looking at the return here.
Okay, great. Okay. So a little allocation and apportionment, just like your friends here at Brooklyn FI. All right. I'm looking forward to discussing more about the nominees' finances in the future. But let's switch gears for a second, or for the rest of the podcast.
Wait, before we do that, have you ever read a politician's memoir?
Yeah, who's the guy from New Mexico? This was in high school. He came to speak, and I bought his memoir. Fuck, what's his name?
New Mexico.
John
McCain?
No, not John McCain.
He's Arizona, I think, anyway.
I don't... Or was it Arizona? I'm pretty sure it was New Mexico. Anyway, obviously, no. Our John Owens bought me Barack Obama's memoir when I was recovering from my surgery, but I never read it. Sorry, John.
Strange choice, but right on.
I was like, thanks. I'm going to go back to Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. I didn't ask this question to answer this question. I just realized that after I asked you that I have read Hillbilly Elegy before I knew who J.D. Vance was. Yeah. And so I read it and I was like, this book is incredible. And then I looked him up and he had just gone MAGA. And I was like, no, bro, no, please, no.
No, come back.
Because he does have a remarkable, at least before he became a businessman. Yeah. Before he was a businessman, he had a pretty remarkable life.
Well,
anyway, where were you transitioning,
well, I was
my friend?
Transition into a compilation of listener questions that we've gotten more recently, and also from kind of the ether of our colleagues at other financial planning firms, asking us specifically, Shane and AJ, about our partnership, both in the context of being like financial advisor or whatever, but like more just like business partners. Like, how do you decide you want/need a business partner was the direct question I got. So I will pose that question to you, Shane. How did you decide how did you decide you needed and or wanted a business partner?
Well, that wasn't my plan.
No sarcasm, please.
No, there's no sarcasm. I promise. True, right? Correct. No, I'll give you a sincere answer. I honestly had been a solopreneur for about 3-4 years doing taxes. And then I was getting into the financial planning space, and I did not expect to have a business partner. I didn't plan to have a business partner, but sometimes you just meet somebody that overwhelms you. Unfortunately, this will be off video, but AJ just hit the best Ariel Little Mermaid pose. And when I met you, you were doing your podcast. Luckily, we can listen to our very first meeting, which is very cool. I think we had spoke for about 5 minutes before we went live on the podcast. So the first few hours that we hang out is recorded.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a 30-minute podcast, and we talked for 2 hours, right?
Yeah. And we decided that we were both obsessed with financial planning and personal financial planning. And we decided, I was also obsessed. I was going to Japan in a few weeks, and we ostensibly we're getting together to talk about going to Japan at a bar in Brooklyn. But instead we just had 3 or 4 beers and talked about financial planning and our plans, or my plans and your plans, and how much you're obsessed with it and how you had gone all in with your podcast about learning about it. And I think you realize, there's a certain type of person that discovers a body of knowledge that is attainable, even though it's difficult, and is attracted to some difficult body of knowledge that they felt like has always nagged them as something they didn't know about, right? Like a lot of people feel like they want to know more about personal finance, but they don't know really where to start. And they'll start reading Barron's, and then they think it's all about investing. And then they start to try to understand individual stocks, and then realize that it's really not the majority of what financial planning is. And then they get discouraged and then give up. And it can be, I kind of did that as well. And I just kind of went overboard like you did with the certified financial planning designation. I think structured approaches to anything are really great. Like Code Academy is great for learning how to code, that's a little bit less formal. It's it's a gap between community college or a full-blown degree, like in computer science or what have you. But the CFP is kind of fun. A lot of individuals have enrolled in that don't even work, are career changers. Because it's kind of structured where you go to community college for 7 classes, and then you can sit for a test. It's not easy, but it's not like a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, and you can do it. Now we're just talking about how much we love the CFP, but and kind of our founder story, and I'll answer my own question. Part of our founder story is you being like, oh, you should go, look at the CFP. And I was like, oh yeah, I've heard that's the best designation. So basically the moment you were like, oh, if you're serious, you got to do that. And I was like, oh, Shane Mason, you obviously don't know me very well because I am very serious.
Well, no, the story I always tell is that I said, well, if you want to be my business partner, I thought I dangled this impossible thing in front of you. Yeah. You have to get your CFP, and that takes 2 years. And that was on a Thursday, and you were enrolled on Saturday. I was like, oh shit. Yeah. Oh no, this person's serious.
I got a live one.
Yeah, I got a live one here. And then I also had tax season coming up. I was like, all right, well, if you also want to become my business partner, you'll have to work for me as a tax person, which means you'll have to get your EA, and you enrolled in the enrolled agent designation in that like a few months later. And you had like a full-time job and you're doing your podcast and you're just so hardcore. There's that phrase like, be so good they can't ignore you. And you did that for the next 2 years until, like I kept putting these impossible carrots on long sticks out in front of you. And you just hit all these crazy goals of study and work and entrepreneurship.
It's so weird that 5 years later, I got so burned out.
Yeah. Right.
So weird.
So you just closed the gap so quickly that you were too good to ignore, so to speak. So I wasn't looking for a business partner, but one showed up and just kicked down all the doors and said, guess what? I own half this thing and you deserve every percentage. Yeah. So, I don't know if you want to transition into like the conversation about what percentage of the company.
I want to tell my side of the story.
Oh yeah, go for it. Please. Please.
Yeah. I mean, similarly, I wasn't looking for a business partner because I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved personal finance, right? I was transitioning from being like a journalist, which was fine and fun, which I had done for a bunch of years. But I was like, this is new. This is a challenge. And I was like, okay, so CFP sounds cool. I obviously like don't know. This is like a body of knowledge I don't know. So I have to go get the knowledge. So I knew that was going to be part of it. But I think initially it was like, oh, the podcast is going really well. Maybe I can be a personal finance journalist or some kind of like something in the media related to personal finance. And then when we met, you were like, oh, I'm a tax accountant. And I was like, oh, everyone I've ever met who's a tax accountant or works in finance sucks. You don't suck. So like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, this is a person that like I can actually get along with, that I have a lot in common with, who's like a normal human. And actually, when we first met on my podcast, Money Explained, like the way that you talked about taxes, I was like, oh, this is someone who's actually coming from a place and understands that there are people who want to know about taxes and want to know about investing in personal finance, but just cannot break through and feel completely alienated. And that was me in March of 2017, right? So like the way that you talked about it, I was like, oh, here's a person that like kind of gets it in the way that I do. And I think together we could join forces. And you were like, I might be starting a firm. And I was like, oh, yeah, duh. I know a million creative, cool, successful people who need this. And you and I were like, basically looked at each other. We're like, I think this is a business. I think these people are getting ignored. I think there's successful people in Brooklyn with money who need help. And we were like, you want to do this thing? And then basically we spent like 8 months kind of like side-eyeing each other, being like, we're good? Like, this is working? Yeah? Okay. Should I quit my job? Yeah? What do you think? And here we are, folks. So I don't know, like what advice would you give to someone who is like deciding if they want a business partner? Like, take our story out of it. That's obviously like anecdotal. Like, how would you go about finding a business partner if I didn't, literally fall into your lap?
Pause. I don't know. I think we have survivorship bias, and we like to say that I like to tell everybody that they should have a business partner to round out their weaknesses. Like know thyself and know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and try to find somebody that you get along really well with. And that person can look at your weaknesses and can forgive you for those and knows what their strengths are. And then they can kind of, whenever, because a million things are going to come across the desk and you're going to have to decide who does what. And if you're really good at delegating or figuring out who is best at solving a certain type of problem and delegating it to that person, and you can focus on what you're good at and they can focus on what they're good at, you have this special chemistry that is 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because I think part of our success, at least initially, is that we did almost everything together. Like we were just like trying to figure it out. And we were like, we don't know how to run our RA. Like it was so much like information gathering, talking to other people, listening to people who had done it before, like industry podcasts and whatnot, and be like, okay, we need to figure out our pricing. And we spent, I would say, way too much time on certain things. We overlapped. We, would be working nights and weekends. And we were like, we got to figure this out together, because neither of us really know how to do this. Sure, I might have this skill, you might have that skill. But like, I do think part of business ownership and the benefit of partnership is that you have a second opinion. So I agree that delegation and having disparate and unique skills is really important. But I do think initially when you're getting off the ground or like starting a new business or taking over a business or merging, like duplicating a lot of stuff and doing it together, I think you're going to get things right a lot faster and you're going to make fewer mistakes. And I think that really helped us, Shane, was like us being like, we had arguments, but it was always like, well, this argument is good because we're trying to figure a hard problem out. And if we had sent you or we had sent me off to figure it out, like the other person would have been like, oh, you're doing it wrong. And then we would have spent more time making that mistake rather than just having that discussion, that brainstorming, like from the get-go.
For sure. Yeah, 1,000%. I have to agree with you. I think it takes both of those approaches, right? Like sometimes you got to have both people in the room and then not delegating at all. We're both going to do it instead of one of us doing it and coming back to the other one and saying, this is how I think we should do it. And then if there is disagreements, I love Bezos's focus on disagreeing and committing. Like no matter what, if you don't like what the other person has said, at the end of the day, you have to make a decision, right? Like if you disagree, like you have two different answers to a problem and one person, you got A and B answer. Whoever brought A and whoever brought B has to be willing to say, look, I don't agree with your approach to this, but I'm still going to commit to it. And I'm still going to help you out with this.
And I would even take it further to be like, disagree, commit, and smile. Cause like you have to disagree, commit, and then go to all your employees or go to all your clients and say, here's this new thing I'm pitching you. I disagreed with Shane. I think he's an idiot. I think this is stupid, but I've committed to it. So therefore I'm going to sell it to you. You know what I mean? Like you have to, even if you disagree, you have to move forward. And I think that's also a word of advice or caution for those entering a business partnership. It's like, there's so much on the line, like at first it was like, is this thing going to work? We both took 3 years of earning potential off the table, basically for both of us. Like that's a lot of money that we put into this to be like, this thing has to work. So if you and I got in a tiff over something one of us said to each other that we didn't like, we had to solve that problem real fast because there's too much on the line. It's like a marriage with kids. It's like you patch up little fights because in the interest of everyone, we got to move forward. Like we got to make this thing work. So I feel like over the years, of course we had ups and downs. I would say mostly it was ups, but like if you and I would get in a disagreement, it'd be like, I really disagree with you. I'm going to go take a walk and be mad about it. And I'm going to come back and now we're going to have a lovely chat about something else because we were moving so fast. You just kind of have to move on. You can't stay mad. You can't go to bed mad. You just have to say what's on your mind all the time. You have to move quickly through conflict. So if you're looking, kind of taking a step back, for those of you who are looking for business partners, you have to know how they solve conflict. You have to know, look for signs. Do they have a lot of friends? Are they in a great marriage? Have they gone through a lot of marriages before? Maybe not a great sign for a business partner. Or, hey, why did those not work in the past? It's a hard thing. It's kind of like one of those weird alchemy things, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little dragon wing and lizard skin, and you put it all together and see what happens.
Lizard skin.
I read a lot of fantasy.
Yeah. I think the classic, I love how you always goof or have a different spin on items and Eye of Newt and Bat's wings,
whatever.
I think would be the Of course.
Shakespeare, how contrite.
AJ it.
So do you want a business partner? I think business partners are great. Ours worked out pretty well, but we've also heard stories and know people where it hasn't worked out. So I would say number one advice for anyone at all before entering into a business partnership with your potential business partner is reading a book called The Partnership Charter. And it basically talks you through things that could go wrong, what to do. What happens if someone develops an addiction that makes them unfit for work? That's a big problem. We got to figure that out. We got to have a plan for that. We got to talk about those things. You and I it was kind of 2 years in. Oh, there's Charlie. Charlie's really the fourth member of this partnership.
That's true. Somebody's here. There's never anyone here. I'm going to answer the door. I'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, no problem. I'll keep talking us through. So the partnership charter would be a great place to start because it really you never know what's going to happen. And like any kind of relationship, whether it's like a marriage or a partnership, you don't know what's going to happen. Good things are going to happen, but also bad things are going to happen. And you want to make sure that this person is going to not blow everything up when bad things happen, because they will. Everything good over there? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a delivery. Then my doorman never does that, but I guess he wanted to be sweet and bring a delivery all the way to my door. Anyway, just one last thing I'd like to say, and there is that, like, if you don't want to play board games with this person or drink beers with this person or get stuck in an airport with this person, or like just truly enjoy this person as an individual. And something like old friends can be interesting, because we were kind of new friends when we got together.
Yeah, I mean, I did not know you at all. Yeah, we
had no baggage at all, which sometimes I think about starting partnerships with my friends of like 10, 15 years. And it's like, you have so many skeletons, you don't have a fresh start. I don't know if I could do that with like an old friend, you know?
Yeah. And the history of the relationship coming into the business partnership. Yeah. Good point.
I don't know. Never done it, but
how about this one comes up a lot. Oh, one more thing I'll say is I hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, I'm partnering, especially in our industry, like I'm a super young advisor and I'm partnering with this like older person who seems really cool, or sorry, I'm going to backtrack that. Doesn't seem really cool. Like, I don't really want to hang out with them, but it's a good fit. And I'm like, if you don't really want to hang out with them, like, you're going to be hanging out with them. You're running a business together. Even if you're dealing with separate clients or different issues, like, you are going to be making important decisions that are going to have a big impact on your life and your clients' lives. Like, you need to not just like kind of like this person. So yeah, I think the stuck in an airport test is a good one. For my friends in dating relationships, I always say the flat tire in the rain test. Like, how is this person going to react in like a horrible, annoying situation where you got a flat tire in a thunderstorm on the highway? Like, are you going to laugh about it and be like, haha, this is the worst thing that ever happened? Or is that person going to have like a full on meltdown and ruin your trip? If it's not A, bye-bye.
Yeah, you need to see how people handle adversity for sure, because there's going to be nothing but adversity for years.
So I also think it's interesting, and people always are like, okay, cool. We decided to partner up, but like, how do you divide ownership? Like, how do you even start to figure this out? And like, I don't know, let's try to remember 7 years ago. Like, how did we even like start thinking about this?
Well, I think I had come from we both came from different perspectives, right? Because you were a career changer and I already had a firm. And so the default, I think mentally for both of, I don't know, speak for yourself, but I think default for me was like, well, I'm going to have to train this person. I'm going to have to, I have all these clients already. So my default was like, all right, I don't think it's 50% contribution off the jump. So should the partnership be 50-50, right? In terms of ownership. And you were coming from a different perspective. Give me your perspective when you were coming in.
I was coming in like, yep, I'm going to be this person's apprentice for a year, but he doesn't know me and he doesn't know that like I'll get my shit together real quickly. And like, I take things very seriously. And if I'm given a task, whether it's, I was going to say do the dishes, but I don't like doing that. Whether it's like get your golf handicap down to 20 in a year, or like build a financial planning firm, like my personality is just like, you have to do it. Like, it's like almost robotic. So in my mind, I was like, he's not going to go for it, but like, I'm not going to do this unless it's equal enough. And it's funny, initially when we were like first talking about it, I was like, I'd go for like 45%, like I'd go for like a little bit of less. But I think as we got to talking more, 50-50 just, I don't know, it just made sense.
I don't think we knew that we could have even had, it's funny, now we have different share classes for the company, but we've never considered any of that stuff. I think one of my main fears was coming to loggerheads on an important decision, because we shared both capital and voting rights equally. So ultimately it was like 50-50 means that we both have the same amount of say, and there was no tiebreaker at all for the company. So the only way that we could disagree and commit was like, we had to convince the other person that this is how we were going to do something. And it didn't end up being that way. It ended up being more so that we like shared a brain, and we didn't really come to loggerheads. I don't think ever. We would always get to the answer. But we shared a brain so intimately that like sometimes we wouldn't even have to talk to each other during meetings with third parties. We could just look at each other at certain parts of like an hour-long meeting and know how we were going to address certain topics, because we both took it so seriously. We worked every weekend for years that we ended up sharing a brain. So we ended up dodging a lot of those loggerheads problems, which I don't know if that's a result of us. I think it's a result of us just enjoying each other's personal time outside of work as well. Like we almost spent every day together for years, right? Like you have to, whoever you're going to become your business partner with, you need to be able to do that. I think you need to enjoy the adventure of business and entrepreneurship.
Well, I think that, and that was because we had the same goal and we were willing both, and our personal lives allowed us to do that, right? Like we were like, we want to build, like, we're not just building a lifestyle practice here. We're going to work a few days a week. Like we are building something that will last. We are building something that's going to be bigger than AJ and Shane quickly. In our industry, it's called an enterprise firm. Like we wanted to build something that would have employees and like we could be removed from, like Brooklyn and I would exist beyond AJ and Shane. That was always the plan. And that required that kind of 24/7 commitment. And you and I both were at points in our lives where that was available to us. And had that not been the case, Shane, I don't think it would have worked, you know, like, let's be frank, right? Like, I mean, you got Charlie in year 2. That almost, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's a good thing I have no other attachments. Wait, I still don't have any attachments. And you and Nabil had already, no, I know, but like, that's true though. I mean, if you start, I always defer to Galloway on these things. I'm such a sycophant, but he likes to say that
Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU and host of the Reply, what's it called? Not Reply All.
Prof G podcast.
The
Pivot podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, listener. I know you don't live in my brain, so
rude. Yeah. You guys, you don't live in Shane's brain. I have for 6 years. Sometimes it's nice.
Consider yourself lucky. But no, he says that you should devote yourself to entrepreneurship in your 20s and your 30s before you have the dogs and the kids, et cetera, so you can build a company and build economic stability, and then go into a little bit more of a coast mode, because once you start having kids, if you don't have the economic stability to delegate a lot of that care, and he at certain points in his career, he also took time off from entrepreneurship while his wife was a badass at Goldman Sachs, probably making 7 figures a year. You just don't have that energy and that time and that availability to get into it in your 40s and your 50s unless you don't have those attachments, which at that point in your life are probably more difficult to acquire unless you have the economic stability that was necessary in your 20s and your 30s. I just had a conversation with one of my, I don't mean to bogart the mic, but I just had a conversation with one of my artist friends, and all my friends were artists in their 20s and their early 30s and really through college. And I was so jealous of the lifestyle and really, like, they literally had fame, and I'm working at PwC on the weekends during South by Southwest, and I could literally see them playing shows out the window of my 18th story Big Four accounting firm. And it was driving me nuts. But I think,
and you're like all of them are into a tax return, and they're like having fun.
For public companies like, that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah. Like you're,
And they all envy me now.
Glad you made it out of there, Shane. We're happy to have you.
Oh God. but like that strained relationship is, I think, part of the reason why we get along. And you said this guy actually has like a life and could talk to me, because it was straddling that strange line. And I think I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think those sacrifices were necessary in the 20s and the 30s. And anyone listening to this, I don't know what you're going through right now, but entrepreneurship is very difficult without someone to support you, or if you have no attachments at all.
Yeah. I mean, like I was married. Well, I got engaged and married in the same year we started the company. So
Nabil's fantastic though.
Yeah. Had the support of a partner, but like, I mean, let's get into it. Like, I'm 36. I built Brooklyn FI for the past 6 years. Mm-hmm. At 36, it's pretty difficult to conceive a child if you're a woman. So like, that's another thing to think about, you know, but both for men and women. I think it's obviously a lot harder for women, but you know, if you're building a business, like, you got to start sooner. And if you want to have a family, that's part of your like life plan, like that has to be a factor. You know, I'm not in the like, it's too late camp, but like, it's harder. It is a lot harder. And I was married and kind of ready to go at 29, and it would have been a lot easier to have a kid back then. So it's just something to think about. Like with a business partnership, like a partnership could be good if if having a family is really important to you and you need some time now and maybe they can have some time later, like it is someone that you can share the baton with as your life changes, you know, like having a business partner while you're starting something, someone has to go on maternity or paternity leave or care for a sick parent or anything like that, that takes you something that's so life-changing that like takes you out of the business. You and I didn't have any of that during this period of building, right? And I wonder how one of those things would have impacted that.
I mean, if you had a kid 5 years ago, we definitely would not have the size of a company we have now. Just because you would have had another kid, 100%. Yeah. And the other thing about entrepreneurship is like there's so much inertia involved, right?
Totally.
Like the fame of the firm and the brand of the firm is all about growth. So growth begets growth. And then you have all this inertia, this ball rolling down a hill, this snowball rolling down a hill. And I think that's super important. We just wouldn't have had that inertia if we were taking maternity and paternity leaves.
Totally. And there are people that have started firms while pregnant and have done very well, but like,
yeah, of course. Incredible
but the
firms.
level of like growth and like all in and like, let's make this work and like, let's do this thing so quickly. Like, absolutely agree. Like couldn't have happened. And I think that's another thing. Like, I think that's what's most important. Yes, totally agree. Hanging out, but like that, like, where are we going thing? And like still being on the same page of where we're going all the time is so, the minute one of us veers off course, Shane, like that's the point at which we're going to diverge, right? The moment that someone's like, no, I don't want this, or I want something different, or I want this faster, or I want this slower, like that's when we have to start, I don't know, figuring that out. And as we add more partners, we just added John, who's now our managing partner. Like he's now a consideration. Now he's an owner, you know, so he's part of this relationship too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You got another 40 minutes?
Nah, I mean, always. For you, always. One last little wrappy-uppy thing. So it's funny, going back to like, how do you divide ownership? There's a million ways to do it. But I would say one thing that was really instrumental was another podcast. Remember Gimlet? There was that podcast called Startup, which was part of Gimlet Media. And the episode is called How to Divide an Imaginary Pie. And basically this guy, Alex, is starting a podcast company. He's looking for a business partner. He meets this sort of perfect match, someone who's got like the business acumen that he doesn't have as the creative. And they kind of talk about how they want to divide the pie. It's a great piece of journalism. He like records him talking to his wife, like in bed at night, and like what she has to say. Yeah. And like both of us listen to that. I feel like so many decisions at Brooklyn If I have been made by you and I listening to podcasts and being like, yeah,
1,000%.
Alex at Gimlet said we should do this. So let's do it. Or like Michael Kitces said this. So like, let's just change our entire business model overnight, which happened like 50 times in the first year.
Yep.
So like, don't be afraid to try shit. And like, I think also don't be afraid to get help. If you're totally afraid of this conversation and you and your business partner are like, you're 6 months in and you still haven't decided how you're going to split it, which is so common, like get help, bring in a third party, bring in someone that you both trust, bring in a lawyer that you pay. Like it's okay to ask for help, to have someone else facilitate these conversations. In fact, I would love to help you facilitate this conversation. Like we're available. Come on the pod, or we cannot broadcast it. Any other thoughts on partnership?
No, not today. I think I have a ton more thoughts on partnership, 100%. I think it's an extremely complicated topic that we could probably speak on for five episodes, and we could probably do a check-in every month and still have 30 minutes every month. So yeah, I think it's only for those that are willing to bare their soul routinely.
For sure. Yeah.
Is how I'll end it.
I think we've had a very successful partnership, and there's many more years to come of this partnership.
Count it.
Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to the Liquidity Event. Sorry, Shane, I stole your outro.
Oh, no, it's all yours.
You can email us your financial problems at liquidityevent@brooklynfi.com. And of course, you can leave us a voicemail or just like DM us. I don't care. We're getting questions from somewhere. It seems like you guys don't like leaving voicemails. That's fine. No. But thank you for those who have reached out with questions. We are trying to get through them all. But we love voicemails. It makes the podcast interesting. So that's memo.fm/liquidity event. We'll see you not next week because we have our in-person planner retreat. So we're going to take a week off next week, but we'll see you the following week in August. Take care.
Thanks, team.